Hello, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us on our webinar about vehicle LBS. This is a general look at our agenda. We have some introduction to the market and some market research around vehicle LBS and a panel discussion. So we have Evgeny Klochkin, the founder and CEO of Shiva, who has some research and some thoughts to share in general about the vehicle LBS market. And then we have Anish Agarwal and Jenna Malcolm, who'll be joining us for some questions and discussion about the reality. They have experience both with Evgeny and Shiva AI, but also their own markets, and as tier ones and part of the automotive industry have some insight to share about vehicle LBS. So I think with that, we have our participants in the room. Everybody's up to speed. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Liz Curtin. I am the executive director and founder of the Auto Tech Council. It's a group of car makers and OEMs who get together on a regular basis, at least monthly, in the Silicon Valley and online to review new companies, new technologies, innovation, and the Honda, Toyota, Volvos of the world get together with the Valeos and Alpines and Densos of the world. And the idea is both to get new technology into the car and the automotive industry, but also to support the startups who are on their journey of trying to become a tier one. So we've been doing this for about 10 years, and we look at about 200 startups a year as a community. So that's my background. Having seen lots of companies over the past 10 years, when someone's in a brand new market and they have to kind of define it, we follow them pretty closely, and that's where Shiva AI is today with this vehicle LBS market. And before I steal his thunder, let me bring up Evgeny Klochkin, founder and CEO of Shiva AI, to tell us exactly what vehicle LBS is and why it's different from regular LBS. May I have Evgeny join us?
Thank you so much, Liz. I'm very glad to join and appreciate you leading and moderating this discussion today on this very important topic. There are two main reasons why this topic is important. It's really the trend that OEMs and tier ones have been following for quite some time now, looking into location-based services and really trying to understand the best way to deliver this value to the drivers and to their customers. And number two topic is that there is new trends today, which is moving away from the marketplace and apps, because there is some realization in the automotive world today, but generally in the market, that consumers still try to stick with their smartphones and are not super excited about trying to learn new user routines from apps that would be integrated within the in-vehicle infotainment systems, and really push throughout the whole industry towards APIs and more lightweight solutions, which would be more seamless and delivered to the drivers. So that is something we are very excited to be focusing on today. And I'm very glad to share a little bit of what our learnings are from the automotive industry and the market research about this, what we call vehicle location-based services as the next big paradigm in the vehicle commerce and in the market where connected vehicles become essentially the must and the huge opportunity for growth for the entire marketplace and the automotive industry. So if we go to the next slide, please. The main point here, when we think about vehicle commerce and services, we see that there are a lot of this is same problems in different decades, right? Because a lot of this are the same questions that have been answered by telecom industry in the past, that were answered by internet industry in the past, because it's just the same paradigm of digital commerce, be it web commerce, be it mobile commerce, and now it's a new paradigm of vehicle commerce because every vehicle becomes connected today. And the questions that all of us have to answer before we actually proceed into understanding what exactly would be the solution and how to tackle this market is obviously the first one, business models. So how do we actually make money out of this? Who pays? How we can achieve growth and sustainability? And then on top of it, if we're thinking about payment, how do we make sure that the drivers are engaged with that type of system? Again, I will be referring over and over through this presentation in terms of the customer engagement being the top priority of everything we need to think about when we think about vehicle commerce. The second question that we have to focus about is infrastructure costs, because obviously we have RFID technology for quite some time. We have NFC that is more proliferated on on smartphones, and as well as touch-free or contactless payments on the credit cards. We also have DSRC, we have V2X technologies, but on top of it, can we move totally into the cloud? Can we deliver something that would be fully digital and easy to do without any extra physical infrastructure in place, which scares off a lot of the service providers in terms of deployments and scalability? And then lastly, obviously, every OEM and every tier one is questioning whether development costs are going to be prohibitive or not. And we have seen in the market that a lot of those tier ones have developed really cool marketplaces, really cool app stores. The issue is that they're still pretty expensive, right? And they're expensive from both development cost and then the amortization cost that then has to be picked up by the OEMs to the degree. And the most interesting part of this whole questionnaire, right, that we have to answer here before proceeding into VLBS, luckily, we've been here before. And therefore, we can apply certain lessons from the past. We've been here before with web commerce to begin with in the early 2000s. eBay, PayPal, Yahoo, Google. So all these guys had to solve 4 key issues in front of them: location, identity, presence, and ubiquitous notifications. Think about this way. Back in the day, when eBay just started to become, we needed to know where I am located, where the seller is located. We needed the mailing address, we needed IP address. We needed to identify that driver. We need to, the user. We needed to authenticate that user, right? Its password, all of these things about security, online security. Then presence. Back in the day, it was impossible to pay online. We had to come up with a new paradigm, what is called card not present. How do we validate that actually not someone stole my card, but it's me paying with this credit card? And then lastly, how we then notify each other, how we connect the seller and the buyer with messages, with feedback, with ratings, and with email, to make sure that the transaction actually goes through. So enabling the shopping cart and enabling this context, and in the last, like the payments, it all depends on those 4 key enablers: location, identity, presence, and ubiquitous notifications. Then in 2010s, we found a new opportunity here with smartphones, and that is mobile commerce. Think about it, Uber, right? Uber knows where I am. Uber knows I'm calling the driver, and Uber knows where the driver is. They know who I am because I'm logged in on my phone. They know presence. They know that I'm present at that particular location, and then they notify me when the driver comes in. So push notifications or any other means. So all of this is what enabled this shopping cart in the mobile commerce world. And then today, we have the new paradigm that is coming up, which is vehicle commerce. Again, exactly about the same things: location, identity, presence, and ubiquitous notifications. It's very important to identify the driver. It's very important to understand the presence piece, which is a term that is coming from telecom industry more than it comes from the automotive industry. But essentially understanding where I am in a given moment in time, that is what is important to enable the context and enable the payments as the last leg of that journey. So the market evolution, the market has learned from the past pain, and it's all about understanding this business model and sleep down procurement and AP processes to make sure that there is the revenue flow, the money flow in between. So when we are coming with our model, for example, from the revenue perspective, we're saying, all right, vehicles are the platform that enables all of this. Therefore, OEMs need to make money. OEMs need to monetize their in-vehicle connectivity. And if we make money upstream by making transactions, enabling the transactions with fueling, with EV charging, with parking, with tolls, then we just push back the money to the OEM, because that is how it needs to work, because there is a cost in connectivity and that data needs to be monetized. Then development tools we have today. OTA updates, they made this all available, right? This is probably the core innovation that happened in the automotive industry, which can allow us to push software back and then connect all this cloud infrastructure that we have built for OEMs to connect them to open APIs, to make sure that now we can just enable everything as easy as an API. Again, many OEMs are telling us today that they no longer want kind of heavyweight marketplaces, heavyweight apps. They want APIs. They want something lightweight. They don't want anyone to come into the IVI and mess around with us. And then lastly, there are revenue models available, which we already know from the past and all the past pains and understanding how the transactional model works, okay? How do we make money per transaction? when the API enables it? How do we make per call basis? If there is a pool API, say fleet management API, how do we charge the customers? How do we invoice the customers for this? How do we figure out reconciliation and settlement of the payment? All of this is already known, and we can deliver the models, tools, and core enablers today. So if you look at the marketplace as it is, obviously it is already kind of coming up. There are certain players in this space that are already starting to bring it out. It's just fragmented. It's pretty fragmented. So enabling vehicle context and payments, it happens in the layer 7 to 9, which is real-time services, enterprise, and mobile and IVI apps. So where you have a vehicle as a platform that is the OEM and TCU HMI from the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. And obviously SoC as well, system on chip, that enables kind of from the core of it. But then the point being is that on top of it, you have the services layer that enables all of this with existing digital experiences from the service providers, okay? So the point being is that if Shell has an app, if BP has an app, if McDonald's has an app, the digital infrastructure, the architectures enabling the actual payment with the digital means and the actual navigation, the actual alerts, ubiquitous notifications, it's already in place, and it all is in place and enabled by the OEM cloud up there in the digital space. So part of the thing that is so important about this is really precise location as the core enabler. And it's not only Shiva that is focused on this. You can also think about ADAS technologies, which are getting proliferated among the OEMs today, among the especially the higher segment premium market. Because essentially, if you get location up to the gas pump accuracy, up to the parking spot accuracy, up to the EV charging spot accuracy, that enables the whole market right away. Think about it this way. If I know that the driver stopped next to a gas pump, it is pretty obvious they want fuel. So having that knowledge alone digitally, programmatically, allows me to then send a trigger to the gas station, to the company like Shell or BP, and then activate the gas pump automatically. And then instead of the driver thinking as to, okay, what do I need to do now that I arrived here? I still need to think what I need here, right? Instead of doing that on the IVI, you can have a simple push notification saying, oh, welcome to Shell. You're at gas pump number 3, activate pump, done. That is it. One tap experience, which is delivered onto you, rather than trying to make you learn new apps and figure out how to do it by your own and change your user routines. This is not what is working. What is working is one simple API delivered to the existing apps, to the existing IVI apps, and then enabling those services in the context that the driver is at. Because thinking about it this way also, if you're low on fuel or you're low on electric vehicle charge, you stopped at the traffic light, and we know that it's sometime in future, in the next 30 to 40 miles, you'll have to charge, or you'll have to fuel, okay? Then what we can do is we can say, Shell, there is a gas station right next here. Why don't you send a notification to the driver, because that's the moment when they think about it. And that's a safe moment because the speed is 0. There is a traffic light. Therefore, they can actually see it on their phone, or they can see it on their IVI that, oh, you seem to be running low on fuel. Why don't you come into the Shell gas station? Maybe we can even give you a free coffee. This is the way how it's not necessarily just having money in mind in terms of monetizing this in-vehicle connectivity. It's actually having the driver in mind. It's a driver-centric experience, consumer-focused experience that can deliver this location-based services in the best possible way without the hurdle of raising awareness, without the hurdle of spending a ton of marketing dollars to make sure that the drivers actually know there is something inside their cars, because it's proactive. It's coming to them when they actually most need it. And at the point, and doing it without third-party SDKs, without any new apps, without going directly into kind of the core of the electronics of the vehicle, which OEMs do not want definitely for any third-party developers to do, then that is how this can be delivered with one simple API. Best practices to be done here, and obviously key decisions, is to decide on the stack. What is the stack? It should be software-based, okay? Hardware already exists in every vehicle. We need to just make use of that hardware. We need to leverage that hardware. We need to know our core competencies as to who is doing what. Okay, say when we go and talk to the tier 1s and OEMs, we never ask them to work with the service providers. This is not what they have done, And this is going to take time to build these types of business units, to even work with the service providers. Obviously, there have been certain projects with, between Shell and some others, between Visa, IPS Group, and Honda, for example. There have been multiple projects like this, but they're sort of like one-off because it's different development cycles. It's different needs, different business models. It has been super hard to do. So there needs to be a party that connects, that glues all these things together. And that does not necessarily have to be even one party, like Shiva being a middleware. We're not alone here. We're talking to BMO at Total, great company, absolutely, right? Because they enable this last piece, which then activates the gas pump. There's this retail automation API. There is a whole slew of supply chain that goes between the vehicle and the service provider that can be activated all at once. And this is the whole idea here.
Great. Oh, that's a lot of information. Excuse me. It leaves me with a lot of questions. And a reminder to everyone else that they have a Q&A button on the bottom of their Zoom screen. But my first question, if you don't mind, is, so telematics and vehicle telematics has been an industry for a long time. So, I mean, starting from before OnStar. How is this so different? Are you asking for a rip and replace? Is OnStar going to be upset if one of these value chains ends up in a car next to them or on top of them? Can you give us a little bit of the history there of where the market has already tried to solve this problem?
Thank you, Liz, for this question, because obviously vehicle location-based services is not new. I would even suggest that German OEMs have been pretty successful in actually pushing them out from the technology perspective. And there has been even divisions and business units. I know at least at BMW, there were some, and obviously Volkswagen has been very pushing as well on this target. The thing that I think is new and happening, and which is kind of making these things more possible, is also kind of catching up of the services side of the marketplace. Because one of the things that happened is, even if you had connected vehicle, 3 years ago, it was not super easy to launch services directly with the gas companies, with the fuel companies. Electric vehicle charging becomes such a ubiquitous topic as well. So now you have more alignment in the marketplace. That is one thing that is happening. Then talking about or speaking about the other part of the where the actual supply chain exists today. Okay, everything is complementary to a degree, right? Because again, when I'm talking about enabling this whole transaction, this whole journey, there are multiple players involved. It's never going to be, say, only us that are doing the whole thing together. I mean, unless we're a $1 trillion company, that is impossible for anyone to do this type of work all alone. So this middleware, it has multiple pieces, multiple places, and all these players just needs to be convened. Now, obviously, we're connecting those dots together, and that is where the value proposition comes in, okay? So we can work over the top of OnStar. We can work on top of Sync, Ford Sync. We can talk on top of Stellantis Uconnect, and multiple other systems out there, because they already exist. They already have been done. And then what the issue have been, at least the feedback we get from the market, is that customers just don't know about them very frequently. It's user awareness to begin with, and essentially dealerships do not necessarily tell a lot of their customers when they buy a new car what is out there. And number two, it's really kind of learning this new user routines is a tough deal. Okay, it's like really pushing them on top. So providing this additional layer of push notifications. And then think about it, because I will refer to your earlier experience with Telecom Council. You obviously are very familiar with how telcos worked around location-based services. Think about Stripe, think about Twilio APIs. They're easy APIs that survived Google, that survived Apple, right? Because they did this piece of the puzzle that no one else either wanted to tackle or is just so powerful, so valuable. And they got so much deep into this, which is exactly what we do with Shiva. Is because we're handling this niche, we're handling this superior customer experience so well that it just it's going on top of everything that is already out there. So no one is displaced, to a short answer.
Well, I would also argue that if you have someone who's in this retail chain, like a McDonald's, they don't want to develop for all of those different telematics platforms so which is why, and this leads me to my next question, what McDonald's does is they just have their own app, right?
Correct.
So how do you compare, or what is the value proposition versus just skipping the car altogether and having this retail transaction happen strictly through a mobile app?
So obviously, this is a very good question that is very frequently asked by OEMs as well, as to where is our differentiation, right? Like, how do we leverage that in-vehicle connectivity in the best way versus a smartphone, versus a mobile app, especially with the emergence of CarPlay and Android Auto. And it's like, oh, right, it's going to be smartphone altogether. There are certain differences here, what mobile phones do not allow us to do. So the way how you look, if you look into the market, mobile utilization, digital utilization is only about 10%, to be honest. Meaning that even if you have that mobile app, what is that? It's probably my 150th app on my phone. So then I install it, then I need to install it, I need to sign up, I need them to create that and remember my credentials, and then I need to remember to use it the next time I go to McDonald's. And most of the things that they've seen at McDonald's is that you get drive-through, but most of the people are impulsive buyers. I'm just passing by McDonald's. Oh, why wouldn't I grab a coffee, right? Or why don't I grab a hamburger? So this is the experience that we saw out there, with the utilization being as low as 10%. And from parking payments, the same, 5 to 10% through mobile app, right? People just don't change, and people don't change their user routines. So what is different here with VLBS, with vehicle location-based services, is this proactive experience, right? Because again, pushing this onto driver as to, you're here, we know what you want. You don't need to remember what you want. You don't need to formulate it through the search button or through the app. You don't need to formulate for us. That is what makes this all very different here as a marketplace.
Great. Well, it sounds good. So now we're talking about an actual transaction, right? And so I think you're adding another player into this value chain. Can you tell me a little bit about the revenue models and the new adjustments, I would say, to the flow of money between the consumer and either the retail or the end of this VLBS transaction?
Yep, absolutely. So this is a convenience, right? In the United States, it's a little easier because Americans love convenience. In other markets, it becomes a little bit harder because, especially at price-sensitive markets such as India, about which Anish Agarwal is going to be talking about in the next part of this webinar. The point being is essentially the business model itself, it needs to be done about the value. About the value, if the value is being delivered, that is when the money can be generated, right? So therefore, the way how we at List approach this, we incentivize the OEMs to go out there and to tell their drivers that this service is now available, right? Through the initial license fee, which is a one-time fee. But then the point being is that we can return 4 to 5x money back to the OEM every year. So say if they pay $2 upfront fee one time, then they can generate approximately $10 per user per vehicle per year, which can be LTV for 5 years. It can get $50, right? So it's a good return on investment because the vehicle is the platform that enables all of this. It's a capability. That is what matters here. But now where the money is being made, the money is being made on top in the upstream. So essentially the driver goes to the fuel station, they pay, Shell or BP or ExxonMobil gets paid, we get paid, OEM gets paid. That is exactly how it works. Because if the value is created at the point of service, that is where the money is being made. Because the consumer is paying, be it integrated within their receipt or being it a transaction fee, such as with credit card companies, 2 to 3%. We only are charging 1% approximately per the transaction here, so we're much lower from this perspective. We're super agnostic from the payment perspective in terms of utilizing existing APIs, existing kind of Braintree, PayPal. It doesn't really matter. Wherever the payment method is already saved for that user account, we can just utilize that because it's just triggering the transaction. That is what matters here from the service perspective, from the seamless user experience perspective. So if the money is being made when the money is being paid, that is how this whole revenue flow works as a money. And that is what makes it so much easier from the business model perspective.
Right. Well, basically new revenue from the vehicle standpoint that's a market right there. Like we've been talking about in-car commerce at the Auto Tech Council for at least 5 years, and that's still not solved. Speaking of which, so one of the reasons that we've been talking about in-car commerce, it's not just the car, not just the driver, but it's the passengers and the passenger economy. Would this be useful for the rest of the people in the car as well?
I do believe so, because essentially when you deliver the service based on the vehicle, it's everyone in the vehicle. It's all about, it's eventually, it's not only driver centric, right? It's also kind of user centric and passenger centric, as you mean. The point being is the car is your unit. If the vehicle is your unit, everyone inside it can get the benefit. So say if we're automating the service and the payment at McDonald's, everyone benefits from this. It's very easy to make that order because by the time you arrive by the intercom of McDonald's, they already know who you are. They already have your payment method. If you have family with you, everyone can get their what they need without the hassle of kind of handling the credit cards and actually making sure, oh, why can't you put whatever sauce on top of my French fries, right? So this is all kind of available in the profile of the driver and the passengers and how frequently they're driving around and what they need. Because the way how we view it as an experience, it's a Netflix-like experience, right? You have profiles. That is what the car looks like. You have profiles. Is it my Netflix kids, or is it my Netflix wife, or is it me watching? And all of this is a customized menu behind this, right? So knowing the customer, understanding the context is what matters. And
Yeah.
that is how you can also increase it to include the passengers as well.
Okay. So now the story keeps getting better, but now you're starting to get into, I think, threat territory, where the incumbents that are out there don't necessarily have a touch on the other passengers and on this retail flow. Do you think that is going to be a challenge getting VLBS services into the market? Is incumbents that are threatened and like the system the way it is?
The funny thing that we see in the market at List is incumbents are threatened by a different approach than what we're taking at List, right? So we're trying to be a horizontal technology. We're trying to be non-exclusive from their perspective because it's not necessarily a service technology, it's a capability. So what is the threat from Twilio, right? There's no threat, it's a capability. It enables to send SMS throughout all the phones, throughout all networks for every app developer. There's just no threat because they're a capability. So we're making the same for the OEMs, and we're making the same for all the service providers and service deliverers, right? Let Shell and Exxon compete, but let not Volkswagen and Shell and Exxon compete, or let not Toyota and Shell and Exxon compete, because they're all in different spaces, right? Let the competitors compete, let the incumbents compete, but not necessarily doing this all convoluted into the same space. And let's bring these capabilities to the market so that anyone can use it, because you just make fair competition play. And that is how incumbents they are forced into this fair competition, which is where they're comfortable because they have been competing this way all the time. So that is how I would view that marketplace and the dynamic there.
Okay, and one more quick question, if you don't mind. I know we want to get along to our group discussion, but based on who we have in the room today or in the virtual room, from a public transportation and city standpoint, we've been talking a lot about retail and gas pumps and McDonald's, but do you find that this will be as portable to smart city infrastructure and other traditional usage-based services just by adding a layer of location?
That's 100%, and more importantly, that's going to be even mandated, Liz. The reason why I'm saying so is look at the infrastructure bill, the Biden administration bill, $2 trillion one. They're all talking about fuel taxes going away. And what does this mean? We still need to tax people for the use of roads. So they're starting to talk about road usage charging. How do you implement road usage charging? It's so hard to do without location. I mean, essentially, you need to know the mileage on every type of road. You need to distinguish those roads because obviously we have decentralized government, and therefore, is it a state road? Is it a federal road? Is it a municipal road? Is it a private road? All this needs to be distinguished and split out so that we can actually make sure that the taxes are distributed fairly. And then the next problem they have is since we still have internal combustion engine vehicles, and still we cannot just throw away fuel tax tomorrow. So if I'm paying road usage fee, and then I'm also paying fuel tax because I'm per gallon, right? So why am I double taxed? That is something that we've seen at least in the state of Washington, which is super liberal, but they had legislation from 2012 on road usage charging. They have not implemented it yet because it's anti-tax, because no one wants to pay two double taxes. So if you can do it on electric vehicles, how do you do it on ICE, on internal combustion engine vehicles? And the way how we could do it is if we combine those two services together, right? We talked about fueling and we talk about road usage charging now plus tolls. So if we combine those two together, then we can extract the fuel tax paid at the time of service. And then we can reimburse or credit that person for that tax. And that is overcoming this whole problem that prevents road usage charging to be deployed fast and furious throughout the United States.
Great. Well, basically what we're seeing here is a platform that can be, lots of things can plug into it. So, and you're in the space of enabling it. So it's like you said, it's the beginning of a growth story. So I appreciate that look at the vehicle LBS
Yes.
and some of the data and the ways to, I certainly liked the slide that you had that had all of the layers and all of the players. So appreciate that. I'm going to ask Anish Agarwal and Jenna Malcolm to join us with their videos on and do a little self-introduction. And then Jenna, if I can start with you, let us know a little bit about your background, how it's relevant to this vehicle LBS discussion, but also your thoughts on this, on Evgeny's slides just now.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jenna, and I'm a business development representative for Hagiwara America. We're a global distributor of electronic devices for tier ones and OEMs, but we're also expanding our reach into software and engineering support services as well. And my team met Evgeny about 1.5 years ago at an Auto Tech Council event, actually. So thank you for that, Liz. We met at one of the startup reviews. And since then, we've been working with Shiva AI on POCs with several tier ones and OEMs. And, you know, as we've been working with Evgeny and his team, we're really starting to see how diverse the use cases can be with this VLBS vision. And it's been extremely valuable to us as we work with our customers on POCs and development. And he mentioned user experience and stuff like that. It's really been valuable, and we're seeing a lot of opportunity here.
Great, thanks for that insight. Anish Agarwal.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm joining in from New Delhi, India. I'm the director of Sterling Group. It's a medium-sized company by India standards with roughly $100 million in revenue, diversified across auto components, which includes conventional auto components like forged parts, casted parts. But we've also diversified into EV components like motors and controllers. And lastly, we're looking at the space of connected mobility and vehicle commerce over the last 1 year. My introduction with Evgeny happened actually at another event last year in May, which was EcoMotion. It's an event based out of Tel Aviv, and that's how our engagement started, wherein we were looking at opportunities within the digitization space with regards to payments in India. Payments starting 2016, we had a massive event in India called demonetization, where overnight the Prime Minister of the country announced that certain bills will be invalid from within the next 24 hours. So this was a massive push to actually move away from a cash-based economy to actually going cashless and going towards mobile wallets and UPI transactions. So our engagement has roughly lasted 14 months, and we've made decent headway in the sense that we've started doing some POCs with some of the oil companies here in India, as well as some interactions with the OEMs. I'm also heading the business for Shiva in India and in Southeast Asia. Keeping in mind the opportunity, even though the price points at which the Indian market operates is much lower, we also believe that the average Indian or the average Southeast Asian driver spends a lot more time in the vehicle because of congestion. So there's a lot more opportunity with regards to in-vehicle commerce.
Interesting. So yeah, we, at least in the US market, a lot of us own cars that they mostly sit unoccupied. That's true. So I'm going to start with a question for Jenna, because we have, what we've just seen through Evgeny's slides is that we're improving some of the IVI and LBS and telematics solutions that already exist in the car. And with your experience and with your customers and the POCs that you have done recently, do you really think there's enough there, you know, enough extra revenue and enough positive like opportunity here for the incumbents to actually move and switch? Are we pushing a rock up the hill, or is the carrot of more revenue enough to make these guys move?
I think it's enough to make a move. You know, it really comes down to the user experience. The industry is hyper focused right now on the user experience, the driver experience. We've worked on several POCs recently that were focused just on how to improve the user experience. And I think that this can really accentuate that. You know, the new vision of VLBS, it's easy to implement, and it greatly improves the driver's relationship with their vehicle. And, you know, you mentioned that in the US, a lot of cars go sit in the driveway, but here in Michigan, we drive everywhere. And so I spend a good amount of time in my car, and however I can improve my experience in my car, that's very valuable to me. And so it's going to be valuable to the other key players. It's going to be valuable to the OEMs and the tier ones as well. And another thing we have to think about here is how the pandemic is changing the way our day-to-day activities carry about. So, you know, the importance of VLBS has really increased as we're starting to change towards a contactless payment, curbside pickup, focused way of life. You know, I don't really go into the stores that much anymore because I can pick up my Target order curbside. And so VLBS can really accentuate that. It can really help with that, and it can make my day-to-day experience a lot better. So I think the OEMs are going to care. I think they're going to want this, and I think we're going to see it from a service provider to the OEMs, tier ones, all of them. We're all going to benefit from it.
Great. Well, that's actually, so I was thinking that it was the revenue carrot that was going to move the industry, but you're saying that it's the customer loyalty and the user satisfaction that is probably more important. Interesting. Anisha, I have a question for you, more in your area expertise. Like, it's a new market. It's very diverse. The retail segments are probably very different than national chains that we have around here. Is scalability one of the hurdles that this technology is going to need to get past in order to be everywhere and to be a very solid component to a larger play?
Absolutely. I think this is essentially a distribution play. If you get enough vehicles, both legacy vehicles through the aftermarket route or through the OBD route, and the new connected vehicles, if you enable these vehicles with services, not only in fueling, but also in curbside pickups, tolling, etc., I think scalability wouldn't be a challenge. It's essentially distribution, either through the aftermarket route or through the connected mobility route, where essentially you'll have to integrate with the tier one or the infotainment maker or the OEM at large.
All right, so that kind of addresses the end user side of the equation. But what about on the car? Do you think, so you mentioned doing some of the aftermarket stuff and then the new cars. Is there a threshold that you think it's a certain penetration before this becomes useful on the other end of the value chain on the retail side?
Well, I can give you from my experience when we speak to the oil marketing companies here in India. All of them run multiple loyalty programs which run into millions of users. So, for example, the largest oil marketing company is Indian Oil Corporation. It's a public sector undertaking. They've got over 4 million loyalty customers split across two segments. One is the retail segment. The other one is the fleet segment, which is for commercial vehicles. So I think if you get down to volumes of say 500,000 or 1 million, then things start to get interesting for service providers like the oil companies, the chains like Domino's, McDonald's, because then you're talking about a sizable user base that you can bring to them.
Okay, good. So, but then the next question that leads me to is margins on retail. So now you're asking to take a piece of, I believe, of the transaction between the customer and the retail. Is there enough margin there to share?
I think so. Certain segments, fueling, which are hyper competitive and margins are very, very thin. There are both public players as well as private players. Some of the public players, the margins are razor thin, and the kind of discussions we've had, and Evgeny, I think, has mentioned that previously during the discussion. The margins are around 1%, and the government in India at least is giving a digital incentive that if you go cashless and if you pay through a mobile wallet, you get 0.75% off every transaction, and that's like a cashback you get in your wallet.
Right.
So the margins will be thin in the fueling space, but I think the opportunity with regards to curbside pickups, retailing, and tolling will be much better. But I think there's enough on the pie for all these three layers: service providers, OEMs, as well as the middleware, to actually make money.
Right. It also sounds like if the public sector is the one pushing this for the tolling and the usage-based fees, then the retail can just slide on top of it, and there's already this platform in place. So interesting. And then my last question, and this is for everyone as well, is including Evgeny, you can come back and join us. I also see a Q&A question that I will get to after this, but how close are we? I've heard POCs from Jenna, I've heard negotiations from Anish, I've heard from Evgeny that he's talking. Are we looking at something that's still a pipe dream? Am I going to see it in cars that get rolled out? How far away are we from having this car platform for vehicle LBS?
I would say it's not a pipe dream. It's here, it's now. We're developing POCs with it, as you mentioned. So I think it's ready today. It can be implemented today, and it's something that we're working on promoting and getting into vehicles as soon as possible. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing this with the autonomous vehicles as well, because it can be implemented into the autonomous vehicles very easily. It can help with locating the exact location of the autonomous vehicle, and it can help the driver connect better with the car as well in that situation. So, as we're starting to push forward with new technology, I'm seeing it being ready to go now. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see it pretty soon here.
Evgeny, is the opening
yeah. Yeah, I was just about to say that what we're seeing is that technologically, the whole ecosystem is ready. As I mentioned earlier, if we talked maybe 1 to 2 years ago, the service providers were not super ready at that point. I mean, connected vehicles have been already kind of picking up. There has already been in-vehicle connectivity at that point. Some of the OEMs already started to have in-vehicle connectivity from 2016. Some of them even earlier, right? Especially from premium brands. So the connectivity has been there. The digital experience or the need for this customer experience in the digital space accelerated dramatically with the pandemic, as you can imagine, because no one now wants to interact with other people, right? People hate crowds now. So the contactless push, the curbside pickup push, what they call in retail industry CNC, click and collect, that got accelerated dramatically. And that just pushed us into the marketplace, which is ready today, because they're searching for a solution. And that is what our engagement's showing, right? Because everyone is ready to go. The question is, how do we actually formulate it in a form of a POC plus pilot plus going into production? So I would suggest that it's more of an operational question at this point than it is a feasibility question, because it's, yes, you can do it tomorrow, right? Or today even. And the other thing which I wanted to mention here is essentially, having this marketplace kind of pushing forward and having it ready, it presents this opportunity here, which we never say that 100% of vehicles are going to have only one type of technology. There could be also other types of technology. There could be other types of approaches here as to how this can be delivered, but it's obvious that the drivers want to have it. And one more piece, which I just remembered I wanted to mention, think about it 6 or even 6 months ago, electric vehicles. Even at the beginning of this year, we were thinking, oh, it's still kind of brewing, it's still kind of coming together. Today, it's accelerated dramatically. I mean, we know that Electrify America is investing so much into distributing the electric vehicle charging spots. Shell committed to 500,000 charging stations all across the United States. I mean, it's just pushing so fast, and OEMs are realizing it so fast. I mean, GM is pushing towards electrical. Volvo already is pushing totally towards electric, right? So this accelerated so fast that we could not even expect it to be that fast. Therefore, I would not be surprised, as Jenny is saying, that already like in the vehicles tomorrow, we see this happening in some degree. And then in like all ubiquitous degree, I'm pretty sure from like next year, this thing just starts picking up fast.
All right. We do have 2 questions sitting in the Q&A. So the first one is about the connection. And does it need to be a continuous, solid V to I connection, or is there room for being offline and buffering and storing forward?
So this is a question from Carrie. Thank you, Carrie, for this question. The point being is that from what we know, from what we see in the market, and the good example would be Hungary from GPS-based tolling. The thing is that you have to actually submit information about those segments of this location data, streams of location data at 15-minute segments, right? You pass through a toll segment, you have to submit it, otherwise you get a penalty, you get a fine from police. So from that perspective, it has to be a continuous stream of data going into the cloud and understanding what is happening from the context of the driver. That is why it's called real-time API layer, real-time services layer, because I know exactly the moment when you arrive at the parking spot. I needed to know exactly the moment when you arrive at the gas pump. Therefore, we do not use, our technology does not use V2I connection because it would otherwise be a little bit spotty. But what we use is we use real-time cellular connection. And what has been happening in the world of telcos recently is they pushed into this new paradigm and new standards that are called LTE Cat M1, LTE-M, and NB-IoT in Europe. So these standards are more for the IoT usage, and they become more kind of density of the network becomes more kind of better to actually make sure that there are no pockets of lack of connectivity. And then on top of it, you have 5G. So essentially, all of this connectivity issues are being solved by cellular operators today, by network operators today. And that is how our technology uses it to deliver real-time services. So we do rely on cellular rather than any type of infrastructure, which makes it much, much harder to deliver real-time services. And that is, I think, in short, location data can be buffered, but the question is, it's not being buffered because of the actual philosophy of the technology itself.
Yeah, basically, if you're delivering location services, you need to know location at the time that you're at the location.
Exactly.
Right. Another question here about partnerships. It might be, do you think it would be a good time to bring up that slide that had all of those layers and logos? Is that a good to dissect who needs to partner with whom?
It's a good one. Yep.
Yeah. Paul, can we bring back up that slide that had all of the layers in it?
The market overview.
Great, there you go. So Evgeny and maybe Anish too, since you are working on putting this together in some different geographies, where do you see the real partnership opportunities here, and what are the critical ones, the ones that if the companies aren't partnering, this just isn't going to happen?
Yeah. So I think in terms of the ecosystem, which is on display over here, the real partnerships are with the in-vehicle infotainment makers. You know, we've had good discussions with 2 of them lately in India, at least, and all of them keep on harping about the fact that, you know, marketplaces is something that the OEM doesn't want to really pay. They really want a seamless experience wherein you have push notifications coming on the in-vehicle infotainment system. So I think in-vehicle infotainment makers, telematics control unit makers, are the important partnerships that one would need to actually enable this going forward, at least from the OEM side. On the service provider side, you definitely need the oil companies, the retail companies, to actually, to actually fulfill both sides of the equation, because you can start providing, you can enable the vehicle with our technology, but at the end of the day, if you don't have service providers on the other side, it's really hard to give the user the experience that they deserve.
Right.
And I will maybe add to this, because yes, indeed, there is a collaboration here that needs to happen, and a lot of it does happen in the OEM cloud. Where our strategy comes in, Lise, is we believe that it's all about kind of enabling the vehicle as a platform and providing this capability, as I was referring to, Stripe API or Twilio API. It's just creating this capability on the vehicle, because the vehicle itself can serve multiple use cases, a gazillion of them, if you will, right? You can see that there are way more logos in the mobile and IVI space here on this slide than on anywhere else, because every service can be delivered. Every type of opportunity can be delivered by the app developers in those enterprises. So our strategy here is we're saying it does, the main partnership that is important here to enable this all is the OEM partnership. And with the tier one may be involved because there are certain things that need to be done engineering wise, but it's the OEM partnership that is the key, the cornerstone whole platform VLBS. Once it is enabled, it's just an API. So what we do on our side is we just handhold some of the early adopters, some of the early service providers to activate those use cases. But after this, you do hackathons, you do developers, you do developer conferences, and then you just deploy this capability to everyone, because then it just markets to developers. It does not have to be hand-holding those service providers anymore. So that is how I would describe the enablement of this whole VLBS market here.
Right. We actually, about 3 or 4 years ago, had a startup come through the Auto Tech Council that was enabling VLBS. They hadn't gone as far as the API layer, but they were doing it through the license plate. So they were like, this is going to be so basically that was how they were getting around working with the car makers. And so they had all of the layers from the hardware up, but they were going to own this technology that was integrated into the license plate and that had cellular, and everyone else could ride on top of it. It was basically solving the problem that you guys have decided to tackle head on, which is finding the OEM partners. Great. So any other questions?
And I think in the automotive.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and Liz, to your last point, I think that going around OEM is never a good idea in the automotive industry. Like OEMs are the ones who have been there for over 100 years. They definitely know the industry. They definitely know the business. They know how to sell cars, how to build cars. It's a crazy idea to avoid OEMs and to avoid that connection, to avoid not sharing revenue and actually making sure that we can create monetization opportunities for the OEMs. That I think is very important to understand for every auto tech startup from that perspective.
Great. So I encourage, if there's other questions, we have a couple more minutes, but Carrie has another one. So she's asking about, so who's paying for the connection? Is it the car or the consumer?
So it is being paid, essentially, Carrie, that's the whole password phrase that we have, is we monetize in-vehicle connectivity. So VLBS actually pays for the data through the transactions. So it does not matter, because eventually the OEM gets paid. And if the OEM wants to take on this cost, that's fine, but it's being paid by those transactions. That is the core understanding, the core underlying philosophy here of how this is being paid for. Now, where exactly this money comes from in terms of who is paying, say, to AT&T, that is more of an invoicing, more of an accounting issue. But the point being is that these transactions themselves is what pays for this telco connection and the data by itself.
Great. And then there's another question here, which is exactly where I was going. So let's assume that we managed to get this new batch of cars, and even like Anish was saying, some of the current cars that are out there enabled through some backdoor technology. What's your future? What's the vision of where this goes and the use cases beyond paying for fuel and buying hamburgers? Is there one? And of course, tolling.
So yeah, I think one of the few areas we've seen is obviously insurance that can be enabled using location and more accurate location. It's not a big topic at this point in time here in Asia, at least, but from our conversations and from what I've seen globally, at least in Europe and in Italy and in the US, insurance is something which is going to be driven hugely by location-based services.
Right. And then, of course, you get into privacy concerns when you add location and tracking and Europe into one sentence. That's a big, yeah, thing that everybody needs to solve.
Maybe let me add one more, Lise, since we're on this topic. One thing which we did not talk about today is fleets. So if you look at strategies of OEMs like Ford, where they were all talking about commercial services as a big push for them, and that is where they focus a lot of their strategy. This is definitely an enablement done by the telematics. Fleets have been there for a very long time. They have been looking into this. There are fleet management opportunities there. Now, on top of it, if you add a digital fuel card, which is what we're focusing on, and that is a lot of what we're hearing, and then you add on top fraud protection, because obviously there is a lot of fraud happening in the fleets. The estimate is about 5 to 10% at least of fuel being stolen, kind of fueling your own personal car as a commercial driver versus actually fueling the car, the fleet car. So there's a lot of opportunities there in the fleet management space, which we see. The issue there, it's a little bit crowded space as a marketplace, as an industry where fleet management happens. The philosophy of our company, at least, we're saying every car has to have this capability. Every driver should have access to this capability, which is why our philosophy is low cost, right? Because you cannot go to a consumer, especially like a low-priced market like India, and say, oh, pay us $50 and then you can get something. This is not going to happen. So it has to be a super low-cost technology, and the business model needs to be unique and innovative to make sure that consumers picks up on this, because they do not. Consumers hate to pay subscription fees. Maybe the last thing I'll just point out, talking about telcos, right? Because OEMs try to replicate telecom experience as to you buy the device and then you pay a monthly fee for connectivity, and that is how they make money, right? From the services, from everything. So they tried to do it, but the problem is the drivers will not pay for connectivity because my car already costs so much, right? I'm not going to just pay for the data because I already have my phone. So that strategy did not succeed because of the market dynamic. Now this opportunity is different because now it's just enabling, it's adding a next layer of convenience, which is better than mobile phones. It's using the unique advantages of the connected vehicle, is what helps us monetize this and helps us deliver the best driver-centric and passenger-centric experience here.
Yeah, well, that brings me back to what Jenna said with her experience. Is it's not so much the revenue streams and it's really the connection between the owner of the car and the brand that is being enabled and reinforced. So a couple of good I think pressures in the right direction for this market. And if Jenna's experience has anything to say, we will be seeing some of these cars at CES in January. So with that, I appreciate everyone's time. A nice deep dive here into vehicle LBS. Hopefully we will continue to see some progress. And with that, I really appreciate Anish Agarwal, Evgeny Klochkin, and Jenna Malcolm for joining us today and discussing this nascent market. And I think if Paul's okay with it, we are at a close.
Thank you so much, Lise, for moderating this session and
My
helping us
pleasure.
guide through the discussion.
Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure.
Bye-bye.